Good afternoon. This is Sunday, and this is November 17th of the year 2024. Now, in 2 days, which would be November 19th, 2024, we are going to have the Pluto entering Aquarius for the final time. Now, when it first entered Aquarius a couple years ago, there was some stir. When it made a Pluto return to the United States natal chart, Russia started a war with Ukraine 2 days later, which they called a special military operation. But yeah, it turned out to be a war. And so anyway, the Pluto entering Aquarius. Pluto enters a new sign, every 20 years. Now, since Pluto has an exaggerated orbit, some years Pluto's only, I think, in Scorpio for 10 or 11 years, and then it'll be in some signs for longer. But anyway, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius now for the final time, starting at about 3:35 or 4 o'clock on Tuesday, November 19th of the 2024. Now, what you see here is a chart, and I've cheated a little bit, even though I'm in Alliance, Ohio. I wanted to move Pluto to the midheaven. It was somewhere in the 10th house in Alliance, Ohio, but I wanted to move it to the midheaven, just so it looked prettier, I guess. The main point, though, is it's in Aquarius. Now I'll be in Aquarius, and that will bring about changes. And what kind of changes we're about to discuss. Now, I've been looking at some of the other astrologers who, posted on various readings and so on. And I have an advantage over them because they posted early in the year. And a lot of them had posted in January. And then, had to predict way in advance. And none of them really tackled the Trump versus Biden question. But see, in hindsight, because the Trump versus Biden question is over, it was over earlier this month. Now we're going to have Trump as president of the United States, and Putin as president of Russia, I suppose. Now, or will we? So that's the question. Now, Pluto is supposed to be revolutionary changes with a large amount of criminality involved. Now, when Pluto was discovered in 1930, your meanings, those were tough times in 1930. That was there was a stock market crash in 29. The Great Depressions were setting in. There was violence. There were muggings in the street, and those were terrible times. So most of the old readings for Pluto, when Pluto was first discovered, was they tended to emphasize the underground, or Pluto's the planet of the god of the underground, but they talked about the underworld then with Pluto. In other words, Al Capone, and gangsters, and a lot of freelance criminality on the streets, which people were terribly frightened of. See? So now with Pluto having been in Capricorn for many years, wonder if this would actually show up. Pluto, Capricorn is the government. So we have basically now we could. Pluto's also the planet now, as we know, of birth, death, and transformation, at which, since 1930, people have kind of assigned Pluto to Scorpio. It was co-ruler with Mars. Mars used to be the only ruler of Scorpio. Back before Uranus was discovered. When Uranus was discovered as a planet, they put that in charge of Aquarius, and then when Neptune was discovered, they put that in charge of Pisces. And when Pluto was discovered, they put that in charge of Scorpio. Mars, which used to be ruler of two signs, Aries and Scorpio, is only ruler of one. But you know that's up for grabs. Interesting here, though, we have the two rulers of Scorpio, Pluto and Mars, in opposition. And that funny little planet you see down there in the fourth house cusp, along with Mars, is Uranian astrology planet, which some people say doesn't exist, but the Uranian astrologers say, yeah, but it works. Must be some sort of force field. But anyway, that's Vulcanus. But you notice it's kind of a Martian-looking thing. It kind of looks like Mars, and that's the key word on that is mighty. So if you would use planet as an adjective, mighty force, mighty Mars opposite Pluto. So you have a lot of violence. Now here's what I'm beginning to see now. When you had Pluto and Capricorn, you had institutionalized criminality by the state. In other words, the governments, the legitimate governments, that's Capricorn, were taken over by criminals. That's Pluto. Or they showed their innate criminal tendencies, depending on what you think about politicians as a class. But at any rate, we had a lot of overt criminality with Pluto and Capricorn, and it was respectable criminality. Now we're in the second last day of respectable criminality now, and it's opposite. It's mighty criminality too. So now we've been seeing the rise of groups of people, and this is mainly in the Mideast. It's become pretty obvious, like we had who are not actually the government, but they work with the government, and they're criminal, they're violent, they rule a lot. But it's just as if Al Capone were made mayor of Chicago. Or he had let's say no, he wouldn't be official. They have an office for Al Capone right next to the mayor's office in City Hall in Chicago. See, that's what it would be with Pluto in Aquarius now. In other words, Al Capone is kind of a side, an entrepreneur in the sense that he's not really sanctioned by the government, but he is successful. Now we have this happening to a great extent now in the Mideast and also in the Caribbean. You have Haiti, gangs of people have taken over Haiti, and also Colombia. We have Mexican cartels taking over the cocaine trade, and these cartels are probably as powerful as the government. In Mexico, we have again cartels, and gangs that are extremely powerful. In Yemen, and by the way, Merry Christmas. If you know, the three kings of Orient were from Yemen. Okay? But now fighting the government of Yemen is a group called the Houthis. And they're kind of like a side group, not the official government. And in Lebanon, we have Hezbollah, which is another group, but not the official government. And in the United States, we have the Jewish Defense League, not the official government, but extremely influential. So what you have is basically non-sanctioned political people entering the realm of politics. And you can have diverse parties, and that's where we come to Aquarius. Because Aquarius would mean, diverse parties. In other words, a fragmentation of the official line into many diverse centers of power. And you have all over, you have centers of power now, but there's not the official government of any necessary country. And we should get more and more of that. In other words, this is only the beginning. The Houthis in Yemen, operating side along with the government. This is like, as I said, the Al Capone moving into City Hall, but not in the mayor's office, but in the office right next door. In other words, he has so that is. Now, having put Pluto on the midheaven here. Now, Pluto's on the midheaven somewhere, somewhere in Ohio, Pluto's on the midheaven. Which might indicate, we have a new senator, I'm in Ohio, I live here right now. I'm in Alliance, Ohio, technically. Now, we had a new guy who made senator just a year ago. And now he's moved on up to Vice President of the United States. And his name is J.D. Vance. And he's the Vice President-elect of the United States. And but I think Ohio will be very prominent in the next 20 years. And I wouldn't be surprised if J.D. Vance was president, sooner rather than later. Because you find this Pluto on the midheaven in the area of Ohio. Now, see, that would also apply to, Kentucky, Tennessee, and all the way down to the Grand Ole Opry. But we're talking politics. And, your official, your important senator is from Ohio. Well, yeah, maybe. Maybe Kentucky, West Virginia, and all those people are going to take on more power. Now, we had an interesting guy, and I don't know if he retired or not, but he was a senator from West Virginia. Well, West Virginia he personally owns a coal mine, so naturally he's for, coal, rather than, let's say, nuclear power or solar power or something else. He's for coal. Well, Pluto, I think, wouldn't be surprised. He's the king of the underground, and he would be responsible for minerals from, deep mines, from mine shafts, and so on. Now, in the uranian system, we also have the planet Admetos, which we find here in the first house. It kind of looks like a Mercury, but with a little cross inside. and it's right from, if you look from the ascendant and go down into the first house, you will see that there's Uranus first of all, and then beneath that you see Admetos, which is and the meaning for that is raw materials and things like coal, things that have been squeezed, turning coal into diamonds. That's that would be one of the themes here. So I guess it wouldn't hurt to own a coal mine in the next several years. But this gentleman that senator that I have owns the coal mine, but I think he's retiring. But whatever happens, you're gonna find that in other words, if you just look at the map, you take, okay, here's Ohio, and then what's underneath Ohio? What's to the south of Ohio? But to the north of Ohio is Lake Erie in Canada. But what to the south? I'm talking the United States now. What's to the south of Ohio? Well, then you have Kentucky, West Virginia. And what's to the south of Kentucky and West Virginia? Tennessee. And what's to the south of that? The deep south. You should look at my map. But next time I do Pluto, I'll be more prepared, huh? But we're doing this from scratch. I didn't have any idea I would be talking about the senators from the South. So that's what I like about these readings I do, is I try to bring in a fresh, up to the minute insights that were never thought of before and may never be thought of again. And, reminding you not... if I say something that sounds worrisome, don't forget I predicted the Yankees would win the pennant. Would win the World Series, and don't forget I predicted Harris would be the president-elect. So, I have a bad track record lately. So, with that disclaimer that this is only for fun and pleasure, don't bet the stock market, or if you do, don't blame me. Okay, that's my disclaimer. Okay, now back to Pluto. So Pluto is making the direct aspect to Mars and Vulcanus, and we're talking about a violent 20 years. Okay, a violent 20 years with criminals, a diversified group of criminals or of powerful people. But they're not all sanctioned by the state. And that's the difference. Because you had a group of criminals in charge of the government for the last 20 years. See? But now the criminals are, they're not going to pay taxes, for example. They're going to be freelance. And you're going to have a diversity of outlooks. See, with Aquarius, everybody's going to do his own thing. So, they will reach agreement by consensus, which is interesting. In other words, you're going to have lots of groups. You're going to have the Save the Whales people, and you're going to have the gay rights people, and you're going to have the traditional Christian Zionists, and you're going to have the Jewish Zionists, and you got all these, and then you're going to have, the Free Soil people, and all kind of groups, the Greens, all kind of groups. And here's what's new. They will be called around the round table. See, a bunch of them, as representing different groups. What do they call that? Different power groups, different lobbying groups, different interest groups. I think that's the word. In other words, these are all going to be private interest groups. And that's where I guess this is probably the most important thing of all for the next 20 years. Decisions will be made around a round table by private interest groups who are extremely diversified. In other words, they have a new word now in the last year or two called multipolarity. And then instead of unipolarity, instead of unipolarity, you're going to have multipolarity. And it won't only be, senators and congressmen. It's going to be rich people. It's going to be people who have a following. Now we see a little bit of this with the internet. Now you have various groups that have followings. I remember when I was a kid in the 1950s, the late 50s, where I heard it said once there are going to be radio stations for everybody. I said, there's going to be radio stations for stamp collectors. And I said, wow, I was a stamp collector in those days. I said, wow, there's going to be radio stations for stamp collectors. Well, it turns out you only had 3 channels in those days, and then you had radio programs. But what has happened now since then is now you went to cable TV, where all of a sudden you had 100 channels. See? Most of which are the same as each other. I mean, but there was channels dedicated to mystery stories, and channels dedicated to sports. See, that's something new, right? But now with the internet, you don't exactly have channels, but you have YouTube channels and websites, which they do have, you might as well say radio stations dedicated to, or TV stations dedicated to stamp collectors and everything else. And this is the diversity of Aquarius. Now, what scares me, or when I was thinking about, the Aquarian age, there was a lot of talk about the Aquarian age, some 20, 30 years ago. And I said, well, you're going to have to listen to all kind of points of view. Most of this will be like endless chatter. And as one who I personally don't like to come up with truth by consensus. But anyway, that's what you're going to have here. And I think in a manifestation of Aquarian age is the telephone, and worse than the telephone itself, the cellular phone, where everybody is constantly connected to everyone else. Now, see, I don't like to be connected personally, but the world with Pluto in Aquarius and entering the Aquarian age, this is the trend, connectivity. So, my son takes his cell phone into the bathroom, afraid he's going to miss something. So so that's manifested by that, and diverse interests, agreement by consensus, and the idea around the round table is that you'll have the most unlikely bedfellows. Now, they used to describe Eleanor Roosevelt as an Aquarian, because if she introduced you to one of her other friends, both of them would be shocked, because she had such a diverse group of people that she was friends with, that they were not from the same social class, and and they were not from the same. They did not have the same lens on the world or the same colored glasses. So the fact that she would have an extremely diverse group of friends. I don't know. I mean, hypothetically, if she had a party, everybody would freak out, by who was there, because they weren't just their people. They weren't just the best people or, the people everybody liked the most. They were, extremely diversified. Well, that is what Aquarius is about. And that is what if you had billionaires and YouTube bloggers and jazz musicians, I'm just making up a few, and coal miners, and let's see, not just money interest groups, but culturally interest groups, and then you had people from religions that are not mainstream, and they're all sitting together, and they all have, well, they wouldn't exactly have equal input, I suppose, but they would. There might even be rules that insist that they be given equal time. So that's what we're facing with the age of Aquarius, and Pluto entering Aquarius for the next 20 years is going to be what that's all about. Now, coming down to the more immediate question, I've been following with great interest the war in Ukraine and the war in Israel, or what they say, the war in Gaza. And you see that, manifestations. You have all these side groups like the Houthis, not the government of Yemen, Hezbollah, not the government of Lebanon, Hamas, not the government of Palestine or the government of Israel. And yet they have incredible clout. And then I see at the risk of repeating myself, I say there were a jet plane from Spain landed in Haiti, and somebody took a couple shots at it at the airport. That's how. So the gangs are sort of in charge of airport security, and it was quite all right, to airport security that somebody took a shot at the Spanish plane. So the Spanish plane left and probably isn't coming back. So if you happen to be that plutonic power that wants to take over the world, you're going to have a rough time. I mean, Haiti is just a small place, right? Ross Perot said, it was so small you could just grab it by the ears and fix it. But it would cost the lives of thousands of Marines, to straighten Haiti out, much less Mexico, Colombia, and, or much less Washington, D.C. So, if you are the Dark Lord of Mordor, that's Pluto, okay? The Dark Lord, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them. Well, it's going to take a long time to bring them all together and in the darkness bind them, to quote J.R.R. Tolkien. But that's Pluto. And that is going to be your... Donald Trump's and J.D. Vance in his place later. That's going to be his assignment. That's what power needs to do. Power needs to consolidate. But what you have with Aquarius is, instead of consolidation, you have fragmentation. And I think the general thing will be fragmentation. With fragmentation, governments are going to find it hard to collect taxes, much less reach a consensus on anything. So that's probably the most important thing that I have said. And maybe it's not true, but that's in the nature of Aquarius. So I thank you very much for your time and attention. And this is Bill Kennick, Uranian astrologer, signing off.